So good morning, everybody. You are, to make sure you're in the right session, Tech Triage for Incubator and Residency programs, a new opportunity for law librarians in the law school IT community. My name is Michael Robak. I am the Associate Director of the University of Missouri Kansas City Law Library, and I am, as of last month, the Chief Technology Officer for the law school. I am privileged to have with me today on this panel two of the, I would say, people who have been involved not just from the incubator area, but also the access to justice movement for a very significant period of time. I have to my left Fred Rooney, who is currently the director of the Truro Law Center, International Justice Center for Postgraduate Development at Truro Law Center in New York. And to my right, I have Bob Cybele, who is the Director of Access to Law Initiatives at California Western School of Law in San Diego. I'm going to let both of them give their own biographies. As I told them, I was sort of intimidated by how long it might be. I will tell you this: Fred, to my left here, is a legal rebel from 2013. So well-deserved, and for his work with the Incubator and Residency programs. The way we're going to work our panel today is, first I'm going to give you just a little bit of background of how I actually came to know both of these gentlemen. And then I'm going to turn it over to Fred, who's going to speak for a few minutes, and then to Bob, who's going to speak for a few minutes, and then I will round out the conversation for this program, and then we'll have time, I think, for questions or conversation. But my first introduction to Fred and Bob came when we at the University of Missouri Kansas City, with funding from the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, hosted a Law Schools Technology and Access to Justice Conference in July 2014. I should back up and say, actually, I first met Fred and Bob at the first Incubator conference that was held at Truro Law School in April of 2014, where they were both not just the organizers, but also main speakers. But at our conference that the Kaufman Foundation funded, we are seeking to figure out how to bring together academics, technologists, and people who are interested in the access to justice space to figure out kind of two things. One, how do we go about teaching legal technology in the academy? And second, how can we use technology to bolster access to justice initiatives throughout the country? We then had a follow-up conference to that this past April, end of April 2015, in which we were able to further define the goals that we want, as well as come to some concrete projects that we want to accomplish. A direct outgrowth of the first conference was the development of an Incubator and Residency Program consortium. And my colleague, Professor Tony Lupino at UMKC, has been working with Fred and Bob to put together the framework for this consortium, which we anticipate, or we hope to have in place, I would say by July was the target date, I think. But what we will also have is a third Access to Justice Incubator Conference. There was a second one this past February in San Diego that Bob hosted at California Western. And the next one will be hosted by UMKC in April of 2016. And we hope to see even further development that Fred and Bob are going to talk about. So that's kind of the background for how we got here. Having said that, I'm now going to turn this over to Fred. I'll flip up your PowerPoint.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
By way of introduction, my name is Fred Rooney, and I direct the International Justice Center for Postgraduate Development at Truro Law School on Long Island. Prior to working at Truro, I spent 15 years at CUNY Law School. I'm not a professor. I've never been part of the faculty. Since 1998 through the present, I've worked in postgraduate legal education. In many ways, I think we started the movement in postgraduate legal education by virtue of opening up law schools and saying to graduates, we're not just going to confer the degree, we welcome you to come back and we will train you and we will support you. Up until 1998, I really don't think that existed anywhere. But I'll just explain, I'll try to be as brief as possible. In In 1983, I was accepted to CUNY Law School, and I went to CUNY specifically because it was a brand new school with a mission to use law in the service of human needs. I was a social worker in Allentown, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, prior to going to law school, and I was working with primarily adult immigrants who had all kinds of legal issues. As a social worker, I knew I was limited, so for me, the logical step was to get a law degree so that I could really help impact on their lives when they had legal problems and didn't have the funds or the solutions. So I went to CUNY, was really excited to get into CUNY, spent 3 years enjoying law school, which I don't know if lots of people can say, but when I got out, I was really ecstatic because I had a job. And my first job was at Lehigh Valley Legal Services. And so it was a job, but when I got my letter of acceptance, I realized that with a family of 4, 2 children, wife, myself, and 2 children, my income was $14,000, which actually put me below the poverty guidelines. Had I gone in to apply for legal services, I would have been eligible. And so I loved my first year there. I would have come to you today as a legal services attorney 30 years later, but the bottom line is I couldn't really afford to stay there. In order to spend my first year there, in order to not give up my dream and my goal of using law to serve people and not be co-opted into corporate law, which my family was trying to get me to do, I had to rely on public assistance. We got the WIC program to feed the kids, fuel assistance to keep the house warm, and subsidized daycare. Nobody could believe that a lawyer would, first of all, would have the audacity to apply for public assistance, let alone the need. But that's what I had to do in order to be able to keep focused. I realized after a year that the next step was food stamps, and I really didn't want to have to raise my kids in living below the poverty level. So the only other thing to do without going into a firm was to start a practice on my own. Actually, I started it with a friend of mine who had gone to Antioch College a year before. She graduated a year before I got out of CUNY. Neither of us had any experience in the area of business or, and we all know in legal education, especially back in the days when there was very little clinical education, there was virtually no practical training. So we got out of law school, they conferred a degree, we passed the bar, we were lucky enough, I always say lucky as opposed to smart enough, but we were lucky enough to pass the bar, we had a license to practice, and so we had to hang out our shingle. We didn't have mentors, we didn't have anything, and so I can tell you that it was an excruciatingly difficult experience. Has anybody in the room gone into private practice on his or her own? Yeah. I don't know if your experiences were similar with that, kind of the support to get things up and running. It was really very, very difficult. And so, it took a couple of years, and eventually, Michelle and I split. I had 4 lawyers working for me. And so the bottom line is it did work. But what we had to invest in our lives and the toll that it took on families and everything to be able to make a go of it was really very, very difficult. What happened in 1997, 4 law schools, University of Maryland, CUNY, Northeastern, and St. Mary's, received a grant from the Open Society Foundation, the Open Society Institute back then. And the idea was for law schools to look for ways to support graduates who, very much like myself 13 years before, wanted to do the right thing, went to law school because they wanted to have an impact on justice in this country, but lacked the skills. So I saw this advertisement for somebody to start a program at CUNY, and I thought to myself, wow, this would be a perfect way to be able to use my experiences starting a practice. Spanish is a second language for me, so I was working in a very highly underserved community, and so I figured I'll take a staff, see if I can get the job, jumpstart the program, and go back into my practice in Bethlehem. Well, what happened was, almost overnight, we revolutionized the practices of people like myself who were spread out all over New York City by providing the support and the guidance and the nurturing that you may have gotten if you were lucky enough to get into a large firm, but most of us didn't. So we were the large firm, we were the senior partners, we had someone to help with legal research, and for the first time in the history of American legal education, as I started to say, law schools began to assume the responsibility of doing more than charging a lot of money to educate students, conferring a degree, and then saying, we'll see you at alumni weekend, and you'll get, maybe some bagels and a couple CLDs. That was the extent of postgraduate support until 1997, 1998. For a number of years, we supported our graduates by having them come back to the law school, creating opportunities for them to learn business skills and learn the professional skills that they needed. But there was very, very little mentoring, direct mentoring. A couple of years went by, people were very happy. The network that I started in 1998 grew from 30 people to 50 to 100 to 300 lawyers. This was how people were so desirous of being in a supportive, nurturing community that we created. But in the back of my mind, there was always the idea that the absolute best way to be able to train people would not be through internet and forcing them to come back, battling the traffic in New York City, to get back to CUNY to learn. The ideal way would be to create a space. If we could have one space where we could bring people in to learn over a period of time, it would be ideal. But there was nothing like it. And so for me, the challenge was trying to figure out a structure that would enable us to do what I thought would be ideal. So in 2007, after studying the incubator programs that were set up for businesses and tech and graphic designers, by that time, incubators had become somewhat common for startup companies, but there had never been one that was created for incubators. So in 2007, we received some state funding to buy some capital equipment. We started an incubator. It was done because we felt our grads deserved it. The economy was still somewhat intact, and it was the right thing to do. When we opened it in 2007, I never realized for a second that as the years went by, the economy would collapse, law schools would be desperate to provide opportunities for graduates. Graduates were desperate for jobs. But what happened was there was a perfect storm, and this standalone program in CUNY Law in New York City began to take on a life of its own. I'm going to jumpstart ahead a couple of years. There are now about 46 or 47 incubators throughout the United States. Most of them are, a good percentage are spin-offs of the first one. In 2013, in 2012, 2013, I was on a Fulbright in the Dominican Republic. And during the period of time, I took the model that we started at CUNY to see if it could be replicated outside of the US, since I knew it was working in the US. Fulbright gave me an opportunity to do that. And so we started the first incubator outside of the US in Santo Domingo. And that was in 2012-13. 2013, I came back to the States. I was hired by Toro Law School. First order of business was to start an incubator, which we did. Shortly after I began in November of 2013, we cut the ribbon on the first incubator on Long Island. And these are just a few of the lawyers who were part of the original group. We now have 13 lawyers at Toro. We had empty space, as you saw, empty space in October, and then in 60 days we had a functioning incubator. In my dealings with people all over the country, the idea of incubators began to spread. But when I got hooked up with Bob Cybele and Luz Herrera from UCLA, both who were in San Diego, the movement really began to take shape. And Bob became a key person in the development and the ability to get other institutions across the country to figure out how to create incubators. You can see in this slide, Bob will talk about his Access to Law initiative on the West Coast and the Toro Law program on the East Coast. This is a little outdated because, as I said, there are 46 incubators currently in the U.S. There are probably another 15 on the drawing board, and they've really been blooming all over. This is probably a year old, and now they're all over. I've got to update that with red flags. This was the incubator guide. Bob printed some flyers that, if you haven't gotten them, they're in the back of the room. If you ever want to know where incubators are, look on the ABA website, and there's a directory that will tell you where each one is and kind of what each one is doing. This was just, again, I'm going to wind down because Bob's wants to talk, and Michael's going to talk, and we really want to open up the floor to questions. But this is just the opening of the first incubator in the Dominican Republic. Following the incubator in the Dominican Republic, through connections and my work in India, we started the first incubator in India. And then in in October of last year, through Fulbright again, I was in Islamabad working on the development of the first incubator in Pakistan. I went back in February of this year. We proposed the development of an incubator and submitted funding to the U.S. government. We just got a grant for $210,000 to start and open up the program, which should be in the next couple of months. That's a 2-year grant. And so, that's really trying to take a very kind of complicated topic and trying to get it into as short a period of time as possible. But I would like to ask if people have had any experiences with incubators. Did you know about incubators prior to coming in here? What was it that kind of got your attention and made you decide to come here as opposed to another? If I could take maybe a minute or two. Anybody have experiences with incubators?
Last year, my law school opened up an incubator in Massachusetts, loosely modeled after CUNY, mainly because our dean was part of the team that I believe helped set up the one in CUNY.
Mary Lou
Billick.
Yeah,
you know her?
she was my direct supervisor at CUNY. She was a person who listened to all these crazy ideas about an incubator, and she was the one who said run with it. She then went on to UMass in Dartmouth, and you guys have a really great incubator, and I'm very grateful to Mary Lou, and you can tell her that.
Yeah, she told me, well, I'm the IT director at the law school, and she said, do it. And I said, do what? just make it work. I'm like, okay.
Anybody else? Incubator experience?
We have an incubator at Cleveland Marshall College of Law. I think it's been up and running a couple of years. Myself, I'm not too involved in it, although I'm a librarian, I would like to be. There's kind of somebody else on our library staff assigned to that, but I would like to push my way in and help too.
The Cleveland Marshall incubator, of all the incubators in the world, is really the type of incubators. They were able to get about $1 million plus to create a space. I got $5,000. You guys got $1 million. So there's a huge spectrum of incubators. How much do they cost? Which is usually the question if you go back and start talking about this to somebody in your faculty at the administration. They're going to ask, how much does it cost? Bob is available. I'm available. If you take down my contact information, if you have any questions, if you're interested in more information about how you can start an incubator or you can start advocating for an incubator at your school, we are available 24/7. So.
I just have a question.
Sure.
Just very brief. I don't want it's a little bit maybe going outside of topic, but your international programs, are you training attorneys that were taught in like Pakistan?
Yes.
Oh.
And I'd be happy to talk to you about it afterwards, but we've had to really modify the model because Pakistan falls under the UK model of how you become a lawyer. So we've had to take that into consideration. It wasn't a cookie cutter. The Dominican Republic was a cookie cutter model, but Pakistan is different. My next stop is Nairobi, where we're going to start an incubator there, and that's also that comes under the British model. So it's really exciting, and so please always feel free to reach out to me or to any of us if you have any other questions, either today, tomorrow, whenever, because we're always available. I promise you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Cybele. I am from California Western School of Law. I'm really happy to be back here at CALIcon. I haven't been for a few years, but for about 40 years I was a clinical teacher at various law schools, and I was actually sort of on the cutting edge of a lot of technology things that were more or less wishing and wanting. And it's been great to come back here now and see how many of you have basically carried the ball over the goal line, to use a sports analogy. But things have just really changed and grown, and so it's nice to be back here. What brings me back here is my participation in the Access to Law Initiative, which is the incubator program that I started at Cal Western in 2012. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our incubator program. We're going to try to each keep this relatively short so that we have more time for questions and discussions. But ALI, Access to Law Initiative, is not a student program. It's for graduates. As Fred pointed out, he kind of chartered the way for law schools to start thinking about a responsibility or an opportunity with respect to former students after they had graduated. The purposes of ALI are to train and support the lawyers in developing and operating a practice in an economically viable way, and to meet the demand, or help meet the demand, for affordable legal services, the justice gap. And hopefully most of you are already aware of the fact that more than half of the people who are eligible for legal aid in this country don't get it because there aren't adequate resources or for a variety of other reasons. And that's just the people who are eligible for legal aid. Beyond that, there's an even larger group of people who aren't eligible for legal aid but still can't afford a lawyer or can't get access to the legal system for a variety of reasons, which could be ethnic, cultural, language, you name it. Lots of different reasons. So, so those are two of the primary goals, but I'd be remiss if I didn't identify my primary motivation in starting the Access to Law initiative, which was basically that I kept hearing from my students when I gave them the opportunity to tell me what their ideal career would be. I would tell them, oh, I'm going to forgive, hypothetically, all your, I had a magic wand at the time. I'm going to forgive all your student loans, and I'm going to pay you a stipend. And the only condition is you have to use your legal education, because otherwise they'd all go surfing in San Diego. So about 40 to 50% of my students, and this was over 5 years, said, I want to do a solo practice, I want to go back and serve my community, or I want to target this legal issue like immigration or consumer fraud or some other issue that wasn't getting adequate attention and was harming a lot of people. I call it real lawyering for real people. That's what they wanted to do. So there I was, knowing that all of my, not all, but a lot of my former students had this goal, and of course in class our discussion would be about, okay, if that's your goal, how are you going to get from passing the bar to achieving your goal? What are the steps you could take? It became pretty clear to me that there was a pretty good chance that an incubator program would help those people. So I set out not to solve the justice gap. I'm too old for that stuff. I certainly knew that I could help provide the training for these lawyers, but I really wanted to just help them attain a satisfying career in the law. And somewhat selfishly, I have to say, I practiced law for more than 40 years, and I can look back and say, I had a great career. I'm glad I did the things I did. And as I look at students today, I think it's a challenge for them to imagine getting on a path where they'll be able to look back in 40 years and say, I'm really happy with the choices I made and the things I did. So those were the motivations. I do want to clear up a commonly asked question, which is, isn't it true that law schools are starting these programs to improve their employment statistics for U.S. News and World Report? And my answer to that is A, I never even thought of that when I started Access to Law, but B, more importantly, I guess, or more to the point, most of the people who come into my program have been out of law school for more than 9 months. U.S. News really doesn't care beyond 9 months after graduation. So the law school doesn't get any credit for most of the people who join my program. Although increasingly, I'm getting students who come to me and say, I'm interested in your program after I graduate, what courses should I take? What things should I do to prepare myself? And that's one of the reasons why we're here with you today. So the program, Access to Law Initiative, is available for people who want to do a solo practice, a small firm, or a nonprofit. We're perfectly open to incubate any of those models. The people who come into the program are often people who have worked for somebody else for a year or two, so they've honed some of their substantive knowledge and maybe some of the practical stuff about going to court, but they haven't run their own firm. So they are interested in continuing to practice law, but they know that they need to learn how to market the practice and manage the practice. And then, as I said, we're increasingly getting interest from new grads. And again, not because they can't get a job. When I get asked by those people about entry to the incubator, frankly, I tend to discourage them. Because you really got to want to go out there and market yourself and do the networking and build your website or whatever marketing path you're going to do. It takes a lot of time and effort. If you're not into that, the incubator is probably not for you. We have 2 offices. Both, Fred was talking about Cleveland Marshall and their $1 million startup. We had no money. I went to the dean and I said, I want to start this incubator. His reaction was, I passed the first test, it wasn't going to cost him anything. The second test was, why should the law school be involved in this if it's not going to serve students? That took a little more explaining. But eventually, I found space in an executive suite arrangement. Most of you, I think, know what executive suites are. It's just like a floor in usually a first-class office building where they rent out space to individuals. They could be lawyers, they could be insurance brokers, mortgage brokers, financial people, accountants, tax specialists, whatever. And they share a common reception area. But these are first-class spaces, so even with no budget, we wound up on the 33rd floor of Symphony Towers, which is one of the prime locations for actually solo practitioners. So we have 2 offices, they're both in executive suites, which means that I didn't have to worry about buying furniture, I didn't have to worry about contracting for internet service. The receptionists are there to greet clients. If you have clinical programs at your law schools, you probably can imagine what it looks like when you walk into the clinic and there's like 10 desks or workstations in a big bullpen room. That's what our office is like. We have a big room, 8 desks, 8 lawyers renting space there, getting access to all the services, but they can't meet with their clients in the office because of confidentiality and a million other reasons. So they have access to conference rooms on our floor. And although I don't endorse as a method of choosing your lawyer the surroundings, virtually nobody who meets one of our lawyers in a conference room on the 33rd floor of Symphony Towers thinks that they're getting subpar legal services or that they're not getting representation from a high quality source. So it has the benefits of the trappings. It also has the networking benefit and the mentoring benefits, because there are successful lawyers in many areas of practice that our lawyers want to engage in, and they literally can go down the hall and get mentoring. And the last piece is they pay their rent directly to the landlord. The law school is not a subtenant that then has to turn around and lease space to the lawyers. If I say students and confuse you, please don't hesitate to correct me. I'm still sometimes think of them as students because they are still learning. Okay, so there we are up in our great space among great people with good services, but the lawyers still don't know what to do other than handle cases if they could only get them. So we provide training on what I like to call client development and retention. Okay, it's marketing. And we bring in guest speakers, we bring in vendors, we bring in SEO salespeople, We bring in people from case management systems like Clio in my case, not to sell their products, and I think this was mentioned in an earlier session. We're very careful to tell them that what they're there to talk about is the value of the type of service, not their particular product. Of course, naturally, they know their own products best, but they're aware and careful. We also bring in experienced solo practitioners, people who run virtual law offices, people who went through all the trials and tribulations that Fred did, and they share their success stories, they share their operating tricks and techniques. We do a lot of training about use of technology for case management, understanding the technology of marketing, managing a website, blogging, using social media. We talk a little bit about technology for the delivery of documents and the delivery of legal services. One of the reasons why I'm kind of excited to be back here at CALIcon is because being in the incubator has really reinforced my understanding of how little exposure law students are getting today about technology in the practice of law. I mean, they basically know how to use the internet, they know how to do Lexis and Westlaw, but they don't have a clue about unbundled legal services, about automated document assembly. They talk about e-discovery, which most of them won't use anyway, but they talk about e-discovery mostly from the perspective of theoretical problems and theoretical issues that come up around it. They really don't have much understanding. I mean, we have people who we had a seminar from somebody who manages and trains people about e-filing, and some of our courts require e-filing. Most of the lawyers didn't have a clue about what was involved in e-filing. So, you know, the technology has marched along, but the gap between what law students are getting and what they need has grown. We talk a lot about ethical issues for solo practice, many of which are related to the use of social media, technology, networking, marketing, and so forth. We talk a lot about billing and collecting and keeping track of your time and why it's important to keep track of your time, even if you're billing flat fees or contingent fees. We talk a lot about alternate service models like flat fee arrangements and unbundled limited scope service. I don't do any training on substantive law. There's a variety of reasons for that. Partly, I'm not licensed in California, so I don't know what they would do to me for unlawfully teaching about a practice that I'm not licensed to do myself. They can't disbar me. It's clearly not a good idea. Secondly, I don't know about the substantive law in a lot of the areas that they need to practice in. I have substantial family law and wills and trusts background, but I really don't know that much about unlawful detainers and consumer debt and mortgage foreclosures. And I did one immigration case 25 years ago with an experienced immigration lawyer holding my hand. You know, I would never do that again without a seasoned mentor. So that's the other piece. I can also, because of my 10 years of experience working in the internship program at California Western, I do know lots of lawyers in lots of areas of practice in the city of San Diego, in San Diego County, which is huge. And I also know that those people are good mentors because they've had law students working for them. So I can connect connect lawyers in ALI with mentors or sometimes co-counselors on their cases because they'll frequently get to co-counsel a case with that person and, of course, share the fee, but they get a good educational experience. The other thing that I've rediscovered, I guess, as a result of being in the incubator, is that the model that is the foundation of all of law school essentially is you graduate and you go to work for a firm. And that flies in the face of more than 40 years of statistics that have been reported that show that 50% of the private practice bar are solo practitioners. It's actually 48 to 49% very consistently over the last 40 years, and it's actually increasing. And if you add in the small firm practitioners, it's closer to 70% of the private bar are in solo or small firm practice. So we're not preparing our students at most of our schools. Those of you who are from the elite 25, can probably tell me I'm wrong. But for most of the rest of us, most of our students are destined for and probably happy to be in solo or small firm practice situations. And we're not really preparing them for that in terms of how they think. And that comes home most clearly when every potential client they talk to is viewed as a major time commitment because they have to have full service. And that's from the lawyer's perspective, not from the client's. I can't tell you how many times I've started to refer a caller, and I'm the receptionist for ALI, so I get all the phone calls. And I try to refer a caller to one of my lawyers, and the lawyers will say to me, well, that sounds like it's going to take a lot of time. And I'll say, well, why don't you think about writing a letter to the opposing party? Sometimes a letter from a lawyer is all they need to understand that they can't just ignore this claimant. And you can charge $100 and you can do some negotiation and write a contract or a letter of engagement. By the way, most of them I've never heard or never at least drafted a letter of engagement. Well, at our school they actually have. But they have written one, and they don't understand that a letter of engagement can and should limit the scope of representation if that's what they want to do. Let me wind up by saying, what does the law school get from having an incubator? Well, for one thing, it gets happy graduates. We've had 24 people who have come into the incubator and then gone out, and most of them have continued their solo or small firm practice. Some of them have actually gotten public interest jobs, but I would say virtually all of them are very happy that they came into the incubator and very supportive of the law school for having let me establish. The law school's got a lot of recognition regionally and nationally, in part because we sponsored the Incubator Conference in February, but also because the State Bar of California has been very interested and supportive of incubators, and because the justice gap is really starting to get attention. I hate to be a doomsday person because I'm usually a Pollyanna, but the decreasing enrollment in law schools that everybody knows about is going to have a huge impact on the justice gap. I mean, here we are after 20 years of boom and 5 years of bust, and we've got this huge justice gap. How bad is it going to be when we have even fewer lawyers graduating from law school, and they're all going to want to take these whatever high-paying jobs they can get? So it's going to get worse. Before I turn it over to Michael to talk about the opportunity for librarians and IT folks, I want to highlight my experience at Cal Western of working with the law librarians and the IT folks who are actually probably the most knowledgeable in the law school of the intersection of technology and law practice. Most of the faculty really don't have a clue. And so I think that the people who are in the law library and the people who are in the IT departments, you are actually in the best position to work with us in incubators and help us develop in the incubator lawyers and graduates a sense of how to practice law making effective use of technology for the 21st century. And I see Barbara Blennon is here, and I really need to give recognition and credit to her and the other law librarians from Cal Western, who I know I've already taught some courses to JD students on different legal technology issues, and who have tried to drag some of the faculty into the 21st century by using educational technology, because they're also they're, I guess, primarily educational technologists, not just legal technologists. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Fred. So now I'll talk for a few minutes. Really, the title, Tech Triage, comes from my own personal experience at UMKC. So about November of 2013, Tony Lupino, who was one of the founders of the solo and small firm incubator at UMKC, asked me if I would go over and talk to the tenants about using technology. And he said, could you do what he called the tech triage? So I said, sure, I'll go over and chat with him. And so I went over and met with the first set, which was a 3-person firm. One person specialized in immigration law, the other person was doing family law, and the third person was trying to set up kind of a subspecialty with commercial transactions, commercial work. And so when I sat down with them, the first thing I asked them, I said, so what are you guys using for your practice management tool? And they said, Clio. So I said, great. And I said, so when you meet, or tell me, just run down, kind of how you guys talk about your cases, how you work together. And I should first back up and say, so I practiced law for 15 years before I got my master's at Illinois, and then I went to the corporate sector for a while before I came to academia. In my 15 years, I was everything from, I started as deputy prosecutor, I was court administrator, I became head of the Marion County Justice Agency in Indianapolis, Indiana, which oversaw the development of one of the first civil criminal justice combined computer systems. I went to work for an AmLaw 50 law firm, this was how old I am, in Philadelphia, and then ended up my life sort of working in Bloomington, Illinois, and Springfield, Illinois, in a small firm, and then as a solo practitioner, doing nothing but ad valorem taxation, property tax work. And in my solo practice career, I used Amicus, which was then, this was 96, 97, Amicus was just beginning to come out. So I had a pretty good sense of what these guys should be doing. So I assumed, and I asked them, are you meeting weekly to kind of figure out where everybody is, since you're working as partners? And they said, yes. We meet every week, and we have a Google Doc that we use to track our cases. Exactly. I said, you realize Clio is a practice management tool. Why are you using a Google Doc to track your cases? For which they had no real answer. What they were really using Clio for was their accounting mechanism, because that's what it was about. So that then led me to meet with the other tenants. There were 4 others. And we began to have these conversations. And then when I was fortunate enough to go to the Incubator Conference both in Truro and also in San Diego, it was clear to me that the Incubator and Residency programs are exploding and going to continue, I think, to explode. Because I think, personally, I will tell you that law schools have never not produced Cheeto lawyers, right? They needed 3 or 4 years of watering before they knew what to do as a lawyer. I mean, the only reason I knew what to do when I graduated is because my 3rd year I had an internship in the prosecutor's office. And their idea of supervision was, is there a phone within 10 feet of me, right? So I did at least 800 bench trials in my time as an intern. Now, there was minor stuff, traffic stuff, but it was stuff nobody else wanted to do. Plus, my other great saving for me was that I was able to take, in Indiana, I was able to take the early bar. So I sat for the bar in February of my 3rd year, passed. So literally the day I graduated, I would say I was the only thing I knew of as a practice-ready attorney. I mean, not only had I been in court, understood the court system, but I was literally ready. I was sworn in after I graduated. So I'm a big and huge proponent of the incubator programs, the residency programs. But I know we have spent, at this conference particularly, a lot of time trying to talk about how do we get into the classroom and how do we get to begin teaching these legal technology courses. What is legal tech? What should we be teaching? How should we be teaching it? And I think what the incubator and residency programs offer is an opportunity for us actually to get in a place where we don't necessarily have to justify it to a curriculum committee. We can walk in, we can begin to build out methods for helping folks. As I'm sure most of you know, Clio is now giving their product away to the incubator programs. There's another product called Lexicata. I don't know, has anybody heard of Lexicata? It's actually a front end. It's an incredibly cool tool. It's the closest thing, or actually it is an intake system, a CRM system, and it's built to work with Clio. So basically what it does is it allows an attorney to bifurcate what they're doing in terms of marketing and trying to get folks in as clients. And it sets itself up as a way to manage all the contacts you have, but then also has built in some document assembly stuff. So it creates letters of engagement, it creates other kinds of letters, and has an automatic emailing system. So it's automated in a way that helps the attorney stay on top of reaching out to folks. And then once somebody decides to become a client, because it integrates with Clio, it moves that contact information into Clio. So it's a nice way to separate out and not try to make Clio, or not try to make your Outlook your CRM, not try to make Clio your CRM. This is a very nice product that sits between CRM and practice. And so they're giving that away for free as well. Fred has been able to get an agreement with Lexis and with Westlaw to help out with tools and resources. But here again, my experience at UMKC, our incubator physically sits on a building that's within the campus. So that means that the incubator tenants have access through the IP to our library resources without having to go through the proxy server. And so what we've done with collection development is reach out to the incubator tenants and say, what do you need in order to practice? And because it's not, at least in my mind, it's not inconsistent to buy materials that are helpful to them in their practice, which in turn could be helpful to other attorneys that are in the jurisdiction, as well as law students. So again, this is my own personal experience at UMKC. But what the aha moment though is when I was asked to moderate a panel at the San Diego conference on technology, and my panels were Richard Granite from Florida Coastal, Dan Lear from AVO. Does everybody know what AVO is? If you don't, you should know what it is. It's a really useful marketing tool for the incubatees and for lawyers just starting out.
It markets you without you knowing it too.
What's that?
If you're an attorney, you're on AVO.
Yeah, that's right.
It knows more about you than you do.
Yes, it's actually, if you're an attorney, it's well, you're well advised to go look at what AVO thinks of you to make sure that it's consistent with what you're actually doing. I mean, it's an interesting tool, but Dan is a great evangelical person for AVO, but also for just marketing generally for lawyers. But that particular session, I think, was attended by almost everybody who was at the conference. Because it's clear that technology is the thing that people don't talk about when they're thinking about how to set up an incubator, when they're thinking how to set up these residency programs. And so, as Bob was saying, it's clearly something also that's necessary. And if the incubator folks are going to compete with LegalZoom, or actually any new lawyer is going to compete with LegalZoom, they've got to understand technology in a way that's going to allow them to build out their practice and their practice tools so they can compete effectively. So as I say, to me, the idea of offering to your incubator or residency program, and that's the other thing too, is some of these programs are not law school affiliated, they're bar association affiliated. Because the bar, of course, is under pressure to figure out ways to ramp up employment. So I think California is just about, or Southern California, one of the bar associations there is about, three bar associations. So here's another opportunity for new constituencies to work with within a jurisdiction too. So even if it's not the law school, bar association, who may or may not have a robust or active law library, although Los Angeles Law Library. Actually, there's going to be a panel at AALL where these guys will be as well, talking about incubators and technology. Because again, it's just an opportunity for not just academic librarians, but also, in this case, government librarians, or librarians affiliated with the executive or judiciary, so court librarians, excuse me, to be able to find a new constituency to work with, both for materials as well as for helping with technology. And the great thing I found, because we ended up teaching, Paul Collister, my director, and I, are now teaching a course on practice management technology, but my work with the incubators actually was able to help inform what we were doing in terms of thinking about what is it that we need to be able to teach students. Because the incubators provide that context that you're not going to get in the classroom particularly, right? You've got lawyers with actual clients who are trying to figure out how to use a practice management system, how to use Clio, how to make it all work effectively. And as I say, hopefully not decide that they need a Google Doc or a Google spreadsheet to actually manage the information, that they are using the tools correctly and effectively and efficiently. I will also say this about Clio. I think they do a terrific job with webinars and other kinds of learning events that are just as useful for law librarians to attend as anywhere else. So I have, to round out the incubator movement, and this is the other thing too, this is a new movement, right? In 2007, basically it's the iPhone, right? Same time as the iPhone came out, sort of tried with the incubator, but without the dollars involved, I guess. And so, again, this is my view, but I think as law schools see the viability of sort of the, not medical school model, but the opportunity for graduates to go to a place where they can get some training in a way they might not typically get it. I just think these programs are going to have additional increase, and I think it's an opportunity, again, for the law librarians or the law IT community to be able to walk in and help where right now there's a bit of a gap in that kind of information, that kind of assistance. So I'm going to show one, the ABA has created this wonderful little video. So
We want to tackle the question.
Oh, you're right, it's business. That's fine. Anyway, so I will stop at this point and open the floor for questions for Fred or Bob or myself, or any ideas, suggestions, thoughts.
I do have an idea. If you have questions and you can wait until 11:32, there is a really interesting piece that the ABA created. I mean, I'll stick around. I think we can all stick around for questions, but this is a incubator lawyers from all over the country talking about their experiences, and it runs about 6 minutes, and we've got 6 minutes. So can we indulge you for the rest of the time, and then if you have questions, please feel free to stick around and we'll have time to answer all of them.
How do I look? I'm an incubator lawyer.
I'm an incubator lawyer. I'm an incubator lawyer. I am an incubator lawyer. I started off with the public defender's office.
I had about 10 years of work experience prior to going back to law school.
I come from the big law firm background.
I worked for a big firm.
When you're opening your own practice, everybody kind of operates at a different pace. There are people that dive in and take anything and figure they'll learn as they go, and then there are other people that try to specialize or move a little slower and a little more choosy about what they take.
The incubator is helping me start my own practice by teaching me what I want to do and what I don't want to do.
I'm a solo family law attorney.
I am running a solo immigration law practice.
My practice mostly focuses on small businesses.
I'm a DUI attorney.
I currently practice family law in Coral Gables, Florida.
I am currently practicing in the areas of construction law and contract law and some business law.
Specifically, I'm looking at the immigration issues as they come into play in the criminal system.
I'm starting a medical legal partnership with the at-risk community and healthcare centers in the surrounding areas. We call it health justice.
A practitioner who focuses on LGBT representation.
I currently practice disability law, mainly focusing on children.
Started a nonprofit to work with other lawyers and advocates to help people with disabilities and many social issues.
Election law is also kind of a unique niche.
How do I look?
That's all you're gonna get out of that part.
They come into play in the criminal.
Yeah, your buffer is way long. While we're waiting, can I ask a question?
Yes.
For those two
Oh,
of
it's
you
also
with,
kind of like-
for all of you who have incubators, what's the rent that the attorneys pay and what services do they receive for that?
My people pay either $265 or $300, depending on which office.
Per
they're
month?
in. A month,
Okay.
right. They pay it to the landlords. They get a desk, a file cabinet, a chair. They get reception services, mail delivery is sorted, they have their own mailboxes. They get access to the conference rooms, they get internet service. They get, sort of all the utilities and janitorial services. The key thing they don't get is parking for themselves or their clients. But we actually have a sort of downtown mall that's about 6 blocks away where they can park free for 3 hours, or at least the clients can. And phone service is, they only use cell phones and Google Voice for their business phones. I say all, and I really mean it. I don't think there's anybody that has.
Yeah.
So they either answer their own phone or they hire.
Right.
One of our locations, you can hire the reception staff for an additional monthly fee.
What do they get in terms of interaction with law faculty or who's ever, what's the, beyond providing a space with traditional services, what's the advantage to them of being in a law school affiliated incubator?
We have probably nothing. I mean, we get some referrals because people call the law school, people looking for a lawyer. They get some advantages, I guess, in terms of library services.
So that would be my next question. What are they getting from the library? Any of you?
Barb, do you want to?
Well, I put the Incubator project together with a publisher, Suzanne, California Publisher of Practice Guides, and she gave them access for free. That wasn't through us. The question I had for Michael, I talked to him about that, is what about licensing? Like, we can't give them our databases. They'd have to come onto our campus. They're not on our campus, so we can't say, here, they could come use our materials. Most of them are graduates. I think all of them are graduates, right, Bob?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
so they could come onto our campus and use the materials, but that is my question too. How can we help? So I connected Bob with the County Law Library and with publishers, CEB in California, I was getting my acronyms mixed up, who are terrific, and you've got practice guides. But that's another discussion we were having. How can we, should we provide, and I think that's what you're advocating for, some training, right? Should we have our staff there? But the licensing and the resources, can we provide that, is a question mark.
It's trickier, Greg, because since they're on our campus,
Yeah.
they can get right into the network.
Now, let me ask you a question, Michael. Are they're practicing attorneys?
Mm-hmm.
So your licenses are generally for academic use, so how do you get them around that?
Okay, so for Hein, there's not a problem.
Okay.
In fact, the only thing we have that's available is Westlaw.
And is that a Westlaw public patron type arrangement? So that's not,
Yeah.
that's
So,
not a
I mean,
matter of commercial or not.
So Bloomberg, Westlaw, Lexis, I mean, other than the deals that Fred has cut for them to get access to, which we've set up in the clinic, they don't have access to that. But they have access to everything else. And so we did like the immigration law, AI set resources that we just made available through our IP address. And I talked to them about it, and they're going like, yeah, I mean, if they're on campus, they're on campus. And so I realized that's not going to be the same every other place, but I think that's actually a really important thing for us to kind of think through, is how can we be of assistance in that regard. As I say,
most places, the incubator is not on campus for a variety of reasons. One is the cost of space, but there are some other sort of subtle liability issues even though all of our lawyers have malpractice insurance, the fear is that the closer they seem to be supervised by.
Yeah, sure, then there's part, or, yeah, right. So then, let me throw, you mentioned earlier other librarians, Michael, so this, depending upon the size of the community and the robustness of your local governmental law library, so for example, in Cincinnati, we have a very strong county law library that offers memberships for basically $100 per attorney per year that will give them access to Westlaw and Lexis within that space and some other databases remotely. So this provides an excellent opportunity for academics and government law libraries to coordinate and or collaborate even.
See, in Jackson County, our law library is a private association. So we are the public law library for them. Yeah, and like I said, to me, the thing that I found hugely useful was the ability to go in and kind of work through, well, what do I want to teach people in law school by working with the folks in the clinic to help them actually get started. I mean, so it's kind of that context where we, like anything we teach, legal research, whatever, context is everything. And so this is like a free, I think, in most cases, a potential free opportunity for the librarians to go and say, we can help you. Or the IT folks, depending on, again, what that is, wherever the law school is. But the AA-LL program is on Monday, Tuesday?
It's 20th of July.
That would be Monday.
Yeah. I would encourage everybody to go to that one too, because Janine Liebert from LA County Law Library is going to be leading that session. And I know they've got a good set of materials that they're going to be providing for that as well.
All the lawyers get, in any incubator in any part of the country, get unlimited access to LexisNexis during the period of time that they're in the incubator.
So
the only exception is public records, but other than that, they get everything they
so
need.
So Elsevier's cut a deal for that, basically?
Yeah, and also PLI, I don't know if everyone's familiar.
Practicing Law Institute.
They have unfettered access to
Excellent.
anything that, they get the materials, they get the online course or in-person course, and they get the CLE credits. So there's some benefits to being.
Yeah, oh yeah, well that's a big one, yeah.
Do you have to be on the ABA list?
Sorry?
Do you have to be on the ABA list to get that?
Yes,
yes, you
do. You have to be officially recognized as
by
an
the
incubator
ABA.
program.
But it's fairly, it's not hard to
Their
get.
hurdle's not high.
I want to be mindful of the time just because it's now set 11:35.
Well, I commend the video to you if you want to see it.
If you've got to leave, feel free to leave. If not, this is only going to be another. But thank you for.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Or no, I think.